p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I don't know where everybody is, but it's 1 o'clock here on the Eastern Standard Time. We're just north of Boston. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jim Ward. I'm president and CEO. I'm not president and CEO. I'm CEO. We have a president. That's right. Somebody took that job. I'm CEO of BrainSell. We're a growth enablement company. And what does that mean? It means we really focus on outcomes to help folks get to an outcome of growth or scale or both. Growing revenue, helping scale operations. We do that through understanding each client's strategic objectives. We take the time to understand where you want to go. And then we use consulting methodologies that we have created, such as blueprinting. And then we apply through understanding of people and process. And we're big into the people and process side in order to make sure the technology is a fit. So that's what we do. We were historically a reseller. We've moved to this concept of being a growth enablement company. We still have the DNA of a reseller, but we now have a consulting group, much like a McKinsey or a Accenture, but specifically for the mid-market where the Accentures don't tend to come down. That's enough on us. Today, I want to thank you for joining us for our virtual water cooler, how to use CRM for solid sales forecasting in a downturn. And we're all hoping that the R word doesn't become real. That's not the R word I was referring to, but we need to be prepared, and it's better to be prepared, right? And go into potential downturns. So one of the things that we're doing internally, and so we would like to share with our audience, one of the things that we really want to do is educate our clients, our prospective clients, so that they don't make a mistake in buying and that they're learning along the way in their buying journey, if you're in a buying journey, but you're learning consistently. That's one of the things that we want to do. And that's what this is about today. It's getting creative and being more targeted about sales and marketing and how to navigate uncertainty, particularly as it surrounds sales forecasting, which in some ways, I really believe it needs tech support. You got to get off spreadsheets because there's so much more you can do. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to have, first of all, our panelists introduce themselves, and I want to introduce them, Jason Rushforth and Todd Caponi. Maybe we can start by making your own personal introductions.
Sure, Todd, why don't you go first, or do you want me to go first?
I had you on mute there for a second. I was worried I was going to have trouble finding the button, but I found it. So I can go since I'm already yapping.
Right.
So again, everybody, Todd Caponi, multi-time sales leader, like a lunatic, wrote a book called The Transparency Sale a few years ago. And now I just came out with a new book, The Transparent Sales Leader. But what I do is I take behavioral science. Oh, look at that, Jim, looks fantastic. I'm a behavioral science nerd. And so what I try to do is take those concepts, use them for good, not evil, for your individual contributors. So positioning, messaging, presenting, negotiating, and your sales leaders, and workshops and keynotes all over the place. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Todd. And by the way, folks, really look up these books on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. We make it required reading in our company because they're very educational and it's a super fun read. There are some fiction books that are fun and page turners. This is a business book that's a page turner. So I really encourage you to pick it up and share it with your teammates. Jason?
Hi, everyone. Jason Rushforth. I'm the SVP and General Manager for SugarCRM. I've been with Sugar for 2.5 years, but I've been in CRM for better part of a quarter of a century. So a long time. Jim and I have crossed paths in many different lives, right? Different companies. A lot about my background is, I do consider myself to be an expert in CRM. I've done it for decades. And a lot of the organizations I've worked for, I've been brought in for very specific tasks, which is surrounding operational excellence within a sales organization. And sometimes I think of myself as the cleanup guy. I come in, I look at situations, and I rectify those situations. So it's wonderful to talk to everyone today. I'm really honored to be invited by BrainSell, who's one of our esteemed partners, and Jim Ward on the panel, as well as you, Tony. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have both of you here, and Todd and you and I have gone back a little bit too as well. We've done a number of things together. As you know, I'm a big fan And Jason, we've known each other for a long time. It's funny how as you get older, you see folks in the industry again and again and again, but always respected your expertise. And I like to refer to Sugar as the contender. The contender. If you think about Rocky and the films around Rocky, right? Rocky came in as the contender. Sometimes people didn't know who Rocky was because there's other big brands and people are brand washed. But let me tell you something, that Sugar has a big punch, and I call it the contender. So if you haven't looked at it, please contact us and we'll walk you through all the benefits of the contender. Before we start, I want to run a quick poll. Let's get a better understanding from the audience on your CRM usage or non-CRM usage. Are you currently using a CRM to manage sales activities and forecasting? So focus on sales activities and forecasting. That poll is up now. If you could please answer the questions, and then we'll jump right in, or the question, and then we'll jump right into talking to the panel.
As a panelist, I don't get to vote.
No, I can't either. You know, and so while they're answering those, I would look the polls down. Look at that. We've got somebody in the background, by the way. I want to give her, wow, look at that. There you go. Yes, another CRM, 38% not listed. Gosh, I wonder who that would be or who they are. And 13 not using. SugarCell right behind. The contender is in the ring. So, we've actually done a UFC battle between Salesforce and Sugar before, and so it's very interesting. We did that live. So before we start, I'd like to start with an icebreaker, and I'm borrowing this question from the latest book, The Transparent Sales Leader, Todd, right? The Transparent Sales Leader. At your bookstores now, everywhere. Just want to make sure.
It's on its way. So.
It's on its way. So if you, and this is a question to each of you, and I'll ask first, Jason, if you were put in a room of 500 random people to give a talk, what subject would you know more about than anyone else in the room?
Can I answer with two answers if possible? Well, on a business serious side, sales excellence, achieving results, using CRM to drive your revenue engine would be kind of like the business topic that I would pick. But on a separate topic, I'd like to just take 2 seconds to explain this. Sure. Malcolm Gladwell said you need to do something for 10,000 hours. Now it's been rebutted in mainstream media quite a bit, but let's say you have to do something 10,000 hours minimum to be an expert. I would talk about Call of Duty and how to rank up within a video game. It's a true story. I play the game because I don't do a lot in my life other than my family, my work, and my Call of Duty. And there's a lot of parallels between Call of Duty and what we do in sales. Communication, without it, you're dead. Yep. There's so many metrics surrounding you, but at the end of the day, the only metric that matters is the won or the loss. Did you win the game? Did you lose the game? Mm-hmm. And the way the game is played reminds me of how we play sales. It's just a different parallel. So those are my two topics, CRM and the application of CRM for sales excellence and Call of Duty.
And I've personally been in some of your what was it, SKO meetings. So I've seen what you do, and you are an expert. I have not played Call of Duty with you, and I haven't played Call of Duty, by the way, for, I don't know, my God, maybe 8 years. I have no more video games in my life. So no time. Todd, same question to you.
Yeah, so when cool people are doing cool things on the weekends, you can normally find me reading a sales book or leadership book from the early 20th century. So I'm a sales history nerd of the highest order. Like I've got one here. This one's 1916. I wish you could smell it because it smells like history.
I can smell it. I smell it from here.
It's fascinating. And we're going to talk about this, but there's so many things that they established in the early 1900s that are exactly the same as today. Same challenges, same problems, same objections, everything. There's some weird crap too, like don't get me wrong. But there's one thing, Jason, I want to talk to you about too that I recently discovered. Sales forecasting 100 years ago, they didn't have the same problems they have today, and I think I know why.
I'd love that.
I'm going to figure that out. But I think I figured out the connection between back then when they didn't have CRM, they didn't have Slack, they didn't even see their reps. Their reps would go out for like weeks and they would communicate via wire because there wasn't even telephones yet pervasively. Yet they could forecast. And like I said, I think I know why, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Awesome.
That's awesome, great. So Todd, I'm going to start with the first question to you. I think it really makes sense to open this discussion around the uncertainty that we face today, perhaps with a changing market. Talk us through the impact of uncertainty and what uncertainty may have on our customers and prospects right now, as well as our teams.
Well, yeah, and like you were talking about the R word, right?
Right. Let's not say it, by the way.
Another nerdy discovery I made. You know, in 1921, the sales community experienced 77% salesperson turnover. 1922, 85%. It was involuntary. And the 6 years leading up to it look exactly like the last 6 years here in the US at least. Everything looks exactly the same, including a great resignation type of environment in 1919 after the end of World War I, a massive inflation spike, and then a drop, right? And so we're seeing that now. So I've been ringing the kind of the hear ye bell for a few months. We could see this coming, and historically after inflation spikes and big run-ups, we've had downturns. So, you know, there's uncertainty, but buckle up. So that's number one. But number two thing, just one idea for all of you, and I know this is going to sound wacky, but let's talk about Japanese death row for a minute. So,
okay.
If you've been sentenced to death in Japan,
yes,
if you're on death row, right? The wacky thing about it is they don't tell the inmates what day it's coming, right? So when they go to bed at night, they go to bed going, is tomorrow going to be the day?
Right.
Now, last year, 2021, the inmates got together with their lawyers and filed a class action lawsuit against the Japanese government, calling that practice inhumane. So of all the death row stuff, the idea that they were not informing people when it was coming was driving them nuts. Now, I take that to what's going on today. There is uncertainty. PwC just reported on Friday in a survey of 700 execs in the US that 52% are freezing hiring, around half are expected to go lower or do a layoff, and 4 in 10 offers have been rescinded. Now, my advice for all of you is, with your teams, have you talked about this? You have to. Otherwise, your sales team is like the Japanese death row inmates because they're seeing it. They see it all over the place. I just suggest that if you haven't done this yet, get your team together, embrace what's certain, be transparent about it. Like, here's what we know. Embrace what's uncertain. Like, you can't predict how deep it's going to go. Like, it's uncertainty. Here's the things we're uncertain about, and then create a regular cadence by which you will update the team. So, hey, a week from Thursday, we're going to have another update. We're going to talk about these 3 things. Then 2 weeks after that, we're going to do it again. Embrace what's certain, and then take the uncertainty and create certain predictable updates around that. So your reps will sleep better. As a result, they'll perform better. They'll be more creative, and their IQs will go up while they're in the office. So that's a big tip that I see a lot of companies just going, hey, we can't say anything, but you got to say something. Otherwise, they're all thinking that tomorrow morning is the day the execution comes.
That's a great analogy. Good for you. That's because the alternate is to be the ostrich, right? And so getting and being, and we had a town hall meeting here about that, and I think what we're missing is the cadence of certainty, and then also giving folks the things that they can do to help create further certainty. So that's really great. Thank you very much for that. Jason, let's talk about sales forecasting. Is it a valuable exercise, and how far out should your sales teams be forecasting?
So, I'm going to take it a step higher than that.
Okay.
Why do people own and operate businesses? To make money, right?
Yep.
And so when I think about the sacred time in my calendar, there's a handful of things in my calendar that are sacred, and forecasting is one of them. And there's a plethora of techniques and strategies on how my forecast calls are never one-to-one at a VP to my level. I prefer not to have my VP to the reps be one-to-one. I want it to be a collaborative environment where, we can spawn off and have other conversations than just the call, right? And sales forecasting is sacred to me. You need to do it as a business. The frequency for which you do it usually determined by the velocity of your sales.
Okay.
And obviously, if you're public or private, there's also a different characteristic there, because public companies have quarterly earnings. You know, a forecast starts with the rep to the manager to the VP to the CRO to the CEO, so they understand what to tell their shareholders on Wall Street. I have a close friend who sells aero parts, like parts for airplanes. His average sales cycle is about 12 to 24 months. They forecast monthly in their business because it's not changing frequently enough, and they don't operate on a quarterly basis. We have higher velocity solutions at Sugar, so the frequency for which we do our forecast is weekly, and things are changing weekly.
Yes.
At the end of a quarter, when we're getting to that pinnacle point of closing, they go to daily, because so much happens in a 24-hour time span that we have to keep a tab on the number. How far out should you forecast? It depends on the products and services. At Sugar, it's quarter plus one. At most software B2B companies, it's a quarter plus one, because the data gets sketchy beyond that. Hey, we're working on something this far out, but a quarter plus one is what we do. I think forecasting is an absolute imperative for any business out there.
Yeah, I agree. But again, in summary, what you just said, so you like a collaborative session rather than one-on-ones.
I do.
And when you say the conversation can extend, I think is what you said. What kind of conversations might happen?
Awesome. Competitive. So we compete with Salesforce.com every day of the week.
Yep.
Reps learn by listening to each other, because they don't participate in each other's sales process. So when you get into forecasting a deal, and also they learn from each other, but they can also help each other. Hey, I saw that problem in this deal, and this is what I did to overcome and win that particular deal. So it becomes a love fest of sorts of, beyond talking about the number, it's about them learning together and being successful together.
I really like that idea. And you go to weekly at the end of the quarter. Well, this is a weird question. What time of the day do you do your sales forecast?
Me, I do every Monday morning. I do my forecast with my directs. They do theirs Friday afternoon with the reps in the field, and then I have to do one with my executive team on usually Mondays at 3:00.
Yeah, I find mornings for me because I'm sharper as the day goes on. You get a little tired, and so that's why I was asking the question. Thanks for that, Todd. In your new book, The Transparent Sales Leader, plug. I keep plugging that thing. If I say it multiple times, do I get like a pay-per-click? I don't know. You outlined the 5 F's framework for your sales leaders. One of those F's being forecast, which you unpack in chapter 6. Can you share your thoughts on forecasting with us?
I think it's the longest chapter, so do you guys have enough time? But I'll type for you. The 5 F's, by the way, just for everybody to understand.
Yeah, because I'm curious about one of those F's.
Well, yeah, I mean, the 5 F's is based on this idea that I went from sales to sales leadership, like all of you probably did. And I was used to having a structure and a framework. And then all of a sudden I wake up as a leader and I'm a dog chasing a car down the street, never knowing what direction the car is going. So I created a structure, a framework that once you internalize, you're going to sound smart, but you're going to be able to plan, strategize, and communicate instantly your 30, 60, 90-day plan and see the holes before they form. Now that 4th F is forecast. And I've got 2 thoughts. And I promised this when I talked about sales history. So Jason, buckle up, as I'd love to get your take on this. Now, what I had said earlier was that when I read sales history, I see that one of the challenges they didn't face, they faced all the other challenges, seems to be forecasting. There's no articles about it or anything. They must be okay at it. Here's why I think they got it right back then that we don't today. 1992, Glengarry Glen Ross, right? Like if you go, YouTube, the Blake from Mitch and Murray, his speech to the team, it's berating. Last time I watched it, I cried myself to sleep.
Coffee for closers.
Exactly. Coffee is for closers. There's one thing that he got right. On his board, he had something called AIDA. AIDA was attention, interest, desire. He called it decision, but it was desire and action. And the reason why I said he got that one wrong is in 1898, there was a guy, Elias St. Elmo Lewis, who theorized that all buyers go through 4 stages on their way to making a purchase. A, are they paying attention to you? I is, are they interested in what I have to sell? D, desire. Do they have a desire now for it? And then A, are they ready to take action? That became the basis for every sales process, every sales forecasting methodology, every one. Like you read all of those books from the 1910s, they all talk about AIDA. In 1924, there was an author that said all salespeople worth their salt concede that it's AIDA. Now you fast forward to the beginnings of CRM, and 1993 with Siebel, and then the Salesforce, the Sugars, the HubSpots, all those guys. Out of the box is seller-focused stages. Back then, every rep, the endorphin rushes they got along the process were based on recognizing buyer behavior. And then we systemically, 25, 30 years ago, and even before that in the 1960s and 70s with IBM and BANT, we created systems that put the onus inward on seller activities, and all the endorphins came from that. But as a result, how is it we're having such a hard time predicting when a buyer will buy without recognizing buyer behavior and without making that the systemic core? And so I'm a believer in that chapter. I write about your stages, but layering on top and using as all of the coaching mechanism, buyer centrism. We've lost buyer centrism, and I think that that's been a part of the reason why forecasts got yucky, but it's also part of the reason why the sales profession got yucky too, from a reputation and admiration perspective too.
Right.
So that's number one. And I'll give you the second thing really quick if you'd like. I also believe that one of the problems that I had growing up in sales that I tried to flip on its head was we need to create environments as sales leaders that losing is okay. That to the point where, like, when I got to be CRO of my last company, the previous regime was kind of like, hey, you lost a deal. Well, you suck, and it must have been your fault. And as a result, deals wouldn't go to close lost. Their close date would go out a year, or suddenly they'd be unqualified. Who knew, right? And so I decided, to the chagrin of my CEO initially, but he grew to love it because our forecasting became so accurate, is we had a rep who lost a big deal. We threw him a champagne toast on a Friday. We brought everybody in. We celebrated it for the effort. He's already getting hit in the pocket, but the effort and the lessons learned. We wanted to embrace, and even if it was his fault, we're going to celebrate that as an opportunity for everybody else to learn. But your forecast cannot get accurate unless you create a culture where losing is okay.
100%.
That's an awesome piece of information. And that's the angle you come from, not just from having the sales experience, leadership experience, but also the behavioral science background that brings that angle into consideration.
Can I share a quick story on that, Jim, if that's okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
So my previous role to Sugar, one of the key data elements for a sales leader that sometimes isn't evident is the age of your pipeline. And when you have, let's call it 3 to 6 month sales cycles, and my previous job when I joined, I ran the aging report, which had never been done, and there was deals that were 3,900 days old, and you could just see that cadence of push it out a year. Oh my gosh, it's a year later. Somebody else is pushing it out a year, and losing can be the fastest way to pivot your organization to finding success and acknowledging the loss, learning from the loss, and then moving on. And what you do with that data is what creates acceleration from a revenue standpoint. If you just take it, shove it under the bed, push the op out in the future, you're not learning from it, and you're probably going to lose 10 more like that because you're not learning from it.
Right. And then the data is not accurate. So your sales
Right.
forecasting data is simply not accurate. You really need to rely on this data to be able to, in an uncertain time, to be able to project what's happening and when do you need to pivot if
Mhm.
things aren't happening the way you expect them to. So very important as well. You've kind of answered this question, Jason, for me. What should be the cadence for reviewing their forecast and making adjustments based on the data? Do you want to add anything to that, or do you want me to jump right to the next question?
I would like to add something. It's more of an anecdotal story. So when I join a sales organization as a sales leader, I love to explain to the field that they are a McDonald's franchise owner, and
Hmm.
your franchise is your pipeline, your territory, your governance within yourself. And as a franchise owner, you make lots of money by selling hamburgers or software in our case. But you could walk into a McDonald's in Toronto, Canada, and it could have garbage flying out of the top of the garbage can, stuff all over the floor. And that's the data. What I always like to think of as the data. How tidy
Hmm.
is your territory is
Right.
evidently determined by what they put inside of CRM, and you can tell who the top performers are and who are not based on just their attention to detail within the system for forecasting.
That brings me to a specific question about, how does a CRM platform like Sugar help with this?
I mean, look, Sugar's been architected from ground up to really support the needs and capabilities of sales leaders from sales bottom to top up, because there's a very different activity and action that comes from it. One of the things I love to say about Sugar is CRM shouldn't be a place to tell you what you already know about your pipeline and your customer, right? If I call any rep in the world in my team and say, hey, what do you have this quarter? They're going to go bing, bang, boom, done. So CRM has to provide capabilities that go beyond just data entry, and that's what Sugar's really focused on, right? We've put a lot of rigor around how forecasting can be developed inside the application. But what's really important to me as a sales leader
Hmm.
is that we have a product called Sugar Discover, which
Yeah.
takes snapshots in time of sales pipeline data. So an easy calculation to say is, how much money did Joey close last month? You can pull that report in any CRM. What was Joey's pipeline at the start of last month, and what did he close last month? And let's aggregate that across the past 24 months and see what the trends and analysis look like.
Right.
So, what I think is the biggest differentiator is we have this forecasting module. It allows people to run their cadence inside of the CRM system, so they're not duplicating it on Google Docs or Excel spreadsheets. And it can be adjusted in real time, so you can have that line of sight. But for me, it's looking at the trends and analysis of historical information, which tells us that historical context, unless you change categorically elements of data inside your system, paint the picture for what the future should be, and where there's deviation. So that's what Sugar's been designed to do, is to help really support sales organizations achieve revenue success through the use of our application.
And it becomes more than just, traditional sales forecast and CRM, right? Because you're getting that sort of data that gives you some predictive ideas of what's going to happen, what things you might need to pivot to. And I recently saw the dashboards of Discover, and it was beautiful. Unfortunately, we don't have a shared screen today to do this, but we do have another webinar where we're going to talk about those things, and how Sugar accomplishes that. I think it's probably one of the best, if not the best, sales forecasting platforms, and it's crucial right now, crucial for an uncertain environment.
And Jim, can I tell you a quick story? I work for Fortune 500 mega vendor, and the number of sales operations people to pull data out of CRM and put it into Excel was hundreds of people deep, and it was days of lag between CRM changing and sales operations. So we set out to solve that problem. You should be able to go into a system that collects sales related data and tell it and paint a picture and tell a story. So there's a lot of companies that use Excel today, to aggregate their sales forecasting, which is mind-blowing to me.
It's shocking when I find out. I hear spreadsheets. I know. And you guys have a predictive engine too, which gives you also an indication of what deals are more likely to close than others. So I think that's also phenomenal. Moving on, because I know that we have a time frame. We want to be respectful to the audience members. Todd, one of the other F's in your framework is fun, which, by the way, I love that word. However, when faced with a downturn of the market, leaders and teams can experience an increase in stress and fun tends to disappear. How can sales leaders maintain fun during this time?
Well, yeah, and when I talk about fun, I talk about this analogy. The old saying goes that salespeople are coin operated, right?
Yeah.
Well, they are if you're doing it wrong. That if you create a culture where your teams are intrinsically inspired and variable compensation becomes the reward for doing work they love to do, instead of the reason they do it, that's when you win, right? And one little point on what you two just talked about in terms of CRM that was triggering me is, like I still hear of companies that say, like, how do I get my reps to even fill in the CRM, like to keep it up to date? And that's all based on the culture that you create, the fun that you create as a leader. Like my philosophy was always like, listen, I'm no more important or better than any of you. We are equals. We just have different responsibilities. This is your responsibility. This is my responsibility. And part of my responsibility is to help you. And the only way I can help you is through that visibility too, and that ability to use great technology to be predictive so we can resource and make sure that you're getting the tools that you want and everything's efficient. And then you got to go to the store and buy a bigger wallet because you've made so much money, right? So that's kind of the first part of that. But that whole fun thing, when we think about uncertainty and tough times, is you look at the last two plus years in the kind of the COVID world, and it's been a case study in fun and watching how some companies did it right and some companies didn't. We already talked about that one idea. I've got a model in the book called the praise model for intrinsic inspiration. That the letters praise make up the 6 things that drive us as humans, but specifically as sales professionals, to show up every day, stay, and do our best. Right. We talked about the P already, which is predictability. Like you got to clear that uncertainty out of their minds because they will perform. There's a bunch of other ones in there, but one specifically that I want to hone into is the A, which is aim. If your reps wake up every morning thinking that the purpose of their job is to hit their number and to close business, you're doing it wrong. The companies that really succeed in this market and in any market where things are great and there's tons of jobs, or when things are tight, is when their work matters beyond their forecast. Where they know the impact of their work on you as a company, but your customers and your customers' customers. Like my last company is the CRO of a ratings and reviews technology company, right, called Power Reviews. Ratings and reviews for retailers and brands. Who gives a crap? You know who gives a crap? The consumers that are using that data on retailers' websites to make really smart decisions with their hard-earned money that they don't have a whole lot of. We're making families better and their lives better. Now that might sound cheesy, but if your reps don't buy into that and believe it and feel like they're on a mission to make the world a better place, or to take on the Goliath, right? Like maybe that's the Sugar Salesforce type thing. If your reps wake up every morning going, man, I can't wait to get at it, and I get paid to do this, that's the winner. And so I would just encourage everybody, ask yourself, do your reps know what their work means to your customers, like truly? And do they know what their work means to your customers' customers? If you can trigger that, like we at Power Reviews, we created like review nerd reps, like reps that on their weekends they're reading up on consumer behavior and review impact. Like, really, go do something fun. Well, no, I love it so much. And like we had low turnover, high performance. And I think that in any times, uncertainty or not, if your reps are on a mission, they're going to perform. And then you got to check the boxes on the other pieces. But that's something to make sure that you're doing right now. And I saw a lot of companies suffer from the Great Resignation because that their reps are there for their pipeline and not for a mission.
And particularly, I think some of the generations, the younger generations, are very interested in the concepts that you speak to, and you were inspirational to me, Todd, as well as Lisa McLeod, Selling with a Noble Purpose. And so, and I don't mean to be tooting my own horn, but if I don't toot, I guess we won't hear the horn. But we changed so we decided not just to be a reseller, I wanted to be a growth enablement company so that everybody's focus shifted. And what I want them to focus on is, you don't sell software, you don't sell services, you don't sell consulting, you sell outcomes.
Yes.
And so to focus on the client and the client's outcomes is something that gives them a purpose. And so we measure that. We want to see how clients are performing by working with us. So hopefully that's kind of aligned with what you're talking about.
Absolutely. It's right on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So thanks for that. That really was inspirational. It came from you. I read a ton of books, as you know. So Jason, this is another good question. I like this one. In addition to CRM, there are other technologies that sales teams can be leveraging right now and help to scale and force multiply their efforts. What do you think of some of those technologies? And I like to call them tech stacks or.
Yeah. So I'm going to take us back to 2003, right? And I'll never forget the moment that a gentleman who was our BDR called me and said, "Hey, we're going after financial services with CRM software. Jay, I'm banging the phone. I'm not finding anything." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll go spend $25,000 and buy you a list of every name of everybody in financial services in the United States of America, so you can be more efficient in doing your job to build pipeline."
Mm-hmm.
And that individual created a set of cadences, which some people call sales loft today. And he did that in Microsoft Outlook. And he was building these cadences because the only way to build pipe back then, unless somebody was inbounding to you, was to buy a list, pound the heck out of that list, set a cadence, and find pipeline. And the way you scaled that, for what it's worth, is to hire more. I had a room in Chicago with 45, 50 BDRs, sales development people. If I think about today, and I love this topic, and I'll try and be as succinct as possible. I'm a data nerd at heart. I love looking at data, but I wrote a report internally called Signals, and signals are all around us. And as a seller, if you can figure out the pattern of the signals you can see through tools and applications that you use, you can win on a more frequent basis and build pipeline faster than anybody else in the world. And when I think about those tools, I'm getting to, what are those tools, Jason? You've got.
What are those tools, Jason?
You've obviously got CRM, but when we started looking at Martech is designed for a marketer to run advertising and campaigns. But the things that they're collecting are they're using for audience segmentation, maybe a retargeting exercise, when put into the hands of a seller, are extremely valuable. Now, marketing ABM programs are the surround sound for the messaging that we're bringing to market. But if you take ABM and you plunk it inside of an opportunity inside of CRM, like we did with Triblio, now I can see Bombora intent or Neon intent data. So what are the topics this customer is looking at? What are they interested in? What web pages have they been to? What's the frequency? What's their location of the people looking at it? And, when I look at that data and I'm like, while it can scream, go sell to them, there are situations where it screams, they're not even interested in you. You're column fodder, and you should know that by this data. Yeah. ABM is a massive, massive component to that. We use tools like lead forensics, which is like a real-time aggregation of what's happening on your website. LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Every 7 days, I am looking to see who has interest, and I look for trends within that. Have they been to our website? Are they on LinkedIn Sales Navigator? What are the insights telling me? And then I look at the Triblio intent data, which has an algorithm that scores. I can tell you who's in market for CRM. If you gave me one full day, I could probably take the top 50 largest companies and aggregate every single company by these signals. But it's how you demystify those signals and understanding what those signals are. So there's effort, but there's tools, SalesLoft, Lead Forensics, Triblio, built with. In our industry, I know what everybody uses because it's tagged on their website. So I can see when it showed up and when it disappeared, if you're paying for it, if you're not. And I believe that in 2022, you almost have to be a private investigator and learn as much as you possibly can through these tools beyond what you think you already know to be successful in a sales engagement.
That's right on, man. I was going to say spy. You almost have to be a spy. You've got to be able to do the homework.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Sales Loft, which is a outbounding sequencing. I think they use
Yep.
cadence, and outreaches use
Yep.
sequencing. And then you mentioned lead forensics, which is allows you to monitor website IP addresses, I think, and what are they doing on your website. Sales Navigator, interesting, because we're a Sales Nav. How do you use Sales Nav? What's that angle when you're using that as a forensic tool?
Create your account list. I do it. You know why I do it, Jim? Because like most people at my level don't do it. I do it to educate my people. I need to be the best at doing this.
Yep.
Create yourself an audience, an account list, a lead list. The algorithm in Sales Nav starts looking at the behind the scenes, how engaged they are in content and other people and your brand. And then it creates an AI generated segmentation every 7 days that you can then use LinkedIn Sales Navigator to engage with, or you can just use that for your prospecting efforts. So my lead list changes every week and I can see who's engaging, but it really does start with not taking the entire universe of every company researching your brand. At BrainSell, for example, you saying here is the top 50 financial institutions that I'm interested in selling to. Here's the next top 50 manufacturers. And when you build those lists, then it aggregates it and it gives you insight. Who's looking, what job titles are looking, what their level of engagement is with your brand and the variance. What was it last month? What is it this month?
Folks, I hope you're really paying attention to this, because I think it's gonna make a big difference, not only in sales forecasting, but also techniques, and to be an investigator, and learning about how you get those folks into your pipeline, top, middle, bottom.
Yep.
So, all right, Todd, you ready?
Well, yeah, dude, I wanted to dig in on that one deeper.
Oh, okay.
That's I think this is such an important topic, and I'm so glad that Jason answered. I don't know if you saw me applauding.
I did.
Because what he just talked about is the problem with technology solved. It goes back to buyer centrism, right?
Mhm.
That like today we talk about sales tech. You'll see everywhere, right? We are in a sales technology revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Where like technology's filling every remaining crevice in the sales world, right? And it's not necessarily a good thing. And if you look back through history, like the greatest sales tech revolution took place in March of 1876, when the original notorious AGB, Alexander Graham Bell, made the first phone call, right? Like the telephone became this tool that really didn't become pervasive in sales until at least the 1920s. The first cold calling script I was able to find was from 1910, and it was for business to consumer. But what happened? Well, in the 1910s, sales was trusted and admired as a profession, because it required that human-to-human, face-to-face touch, right? You had to go look somebody in the eye, shake their hand, like make those relationships. Technology over time ruined it, right? Like we ruined the telephone to the point where technologies had to be created to prevent salespeople from using it, through Dr. Shirley Jackson's invention in the 1960s that led to caller ID. And then that didn't work. The government had to create the do not call registry, which in the US, AGB would be rolling over in his grave to know at the end of 2021, there were 221 million phone numbers on it. Salespeople, right? We did the same thing with email, right? Like Ray Tomlinson, 1971, sends the first email. We ruined it. Needed tech to prevent. That didn't work. We signed the Can-Spam Act in 2003, and Canada had their own in 2014 that were meant to prevent salespeople from selling. And why? Well, it was exactly what you were talking about, Jason, in that boiler room in Chicago, where you got BDRs, 1,000 monkeys at 1,000 telephones, like banging the phone. It's because we lost our face. And so for everybody, when you're thinking about those technologies and thinking about the investments, our role as salespeople is to help customers achieve outcomes and help buyers predict, right? We don't sell, we don't buy when we're convinced. If we do, we're pissed about it a few minutes later. We buy when we can predict, which is part of the reason why we read negative reviews first when we're buying something online. You all do that, right?
Yep.
We're trying to predict. If we can use technologies to help buyers achieve outcomes, to flag those opportunities, to spend time on the things that they care about and help them predict, that's how the sales profession continues to flourish. And I loved your answer there, Jason, because the tools that you're recommending are not about scale, 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 and it takes 18 touches to reach an executive. We're only stopping at 10. We got to hit them 8 more times. Like, what? That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Like, let's get smarter and understand why don't they like the first 17? How do we become more buyer-centric and look at technology from that angle? And the professional flourish, but you'll flourish too.
Yeah, I think as a part of that and using the technology is about educating your potential clients, getting them to a point through their journey where they can make a decision about a no. A no is okay, right? And it saves everybody a lot of time. But educating folks so when they come to you, you've answered a lot. Remember, they're 70% of what they're doing. I think it's even higher now. They've already researched the web, so you should be a part of that educational journey. All right, Todd, now let's see, where are we? A lot of companies are considering freemium product and service offerings right now. They're providing deep discounts or delayed payment terms. Do you believe this is the right approach to get people to commit? Oops, I said a dirty word.
Yeah.
The
I've got an article coming out in Selling Power in the next couple of weeks about how I believe the word commit is a petri dish for lies. Like, you just create an environment of lies. Your top performers aren't going to commit, their massive pipeline, because, like, what am I, an idiot? I don't want people looking at me. Their bottom performers are going to lie. Like, of course I'll hit my quota. And when a rep commits a specific deal and it starts to go south, you as the leader become the last person they go to instead of the first one. You got to create environments for losing is okay. Get rid of that word commit, because it really doesn't do what you think it does. The benefit is just not there. Now, in terms of the question about freemium products and that sort of thing, there's an analogy I often talk about that I just want everybody to think about. And it's I live just outside of Chicago. There's a forest preserve out back, and I got a pile of dogs that I'm surprised you haven't heard bark yet. But
I just envisioned by that literally a pile of dogs. So maybe you can restate that.
Well, yeah, got plenty of rescue dogs.
Okay.
Yes, and so, like, if it's a crappy day, I take the dogs, I go the path, right? Like, start, go, get your business done. I want to get back. But imagine this. You're walking on that path, and suddenly the dog pulls you off to do their business, and there's a rock, and under that rock is a little piece of paper sticking out of it. You pick over the rock, and there's a $20 bill. What do? Well, the first thing is you probably go, like, hey, can I keep this? The second thing you do is you probably start looking under every other rock, right, to see if there's more money. So your fast path just went boom, 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 and just slowed down considerably. Yeah. That's the irony of giving stuff away free in a negotiation. The irony is, instead of it speeding things up, it slows things down. The minute that you offer hey, like, I think I bought this shirt at Banana Republic because they had a 40% off sale, but I know that, like, I had a sweater that I ruined before Thanksgiving, like last year, by washing and drying it. Like, I'm not going to go, like, that sweater was still on the website, but I'm going to wait until Black Friday sales. Like, I'm not an idiot, right? And that's what you're causing. Like, the minute you give away anything for free is the minute your customer slows down and knows there's more to be had. So I just think for everybody, you've got to establish a structure, right? Your company and every for-profit company in the world cares about 4 things: how much you buy, how fast you pay, how long you commit, and when you sign. That's the basis by which your company is founded, the basis by which your pricing is structured, the basis by which your sales reps are probably compensated. Share that. When you're talking about price, hey, here's what our price is based on. At the end, they're looking for a discount. Cool, let's look at these 4 ways. Commit to more, pay us faster, commit longer, or let's mutually align around a forecast. You'll build confidence, your deal values will go up.
Right.
They'll become more predictable, and you'll build trust to the goal line instead of erode it. Don't let uncertainty hit your soft spot and start giving stuff away, because ironically, it does the opposite that you think it does.
It's and you lose the value too. Folks lose the value of what you're providing into the marketplace. So I can just tell by looking at both of you, and of course you're looking at me, that I'm gray. And by the way, Jason and Todd, maybe when you first met me, I wasn't gray. It's kind of like I've been in the Oval Office for 4 years. I think all of us, though, are old enough to have experienced market downturns and recessions. Well, and I've been through multiple, right? I've been through the 90s, was it the late 90s, and, '08, and of course, and potentially today. But what is your one piece of advice that helps sales teams and businesses navigate this? So what is your one piece of advice that would help them navigate a downturn? Jason. I thought
I don't know if I
tricked you,
have.
Todd.
I
I
don't know
saw
if I
you
have.
going.
I don't know if I have one piece of advice because there's a plethora of things that'll happen. One is when you hit a recession or a downturn, which we've seen multiple times. Right after 9/11, it was like the software world stopped selling. And when that happens, your internal deficiencies in your process, your solution, all the light shines on them very bright. So, but you don't have to spend your time resolving it. Write it down, acknowledge it, and wait for the appropriate time to resolve whatever process issue. The biggest thing that I want to talk about with the subprime mortgage, I watched people make so much money through what was a horrific economic time in our generation. And the one thing that was tried, tested, and true was the people that made money pivoted. So they looked at it, and I had a buddy that worked for a Big Four consulting firm, and he said, we just put an immense amount of money into going after the companies that need help, like the Bear Stearns of the world. Well, they were out of business, but the financial institutions that needed help, they were still spending money on technology.
Right.
They were doing it to offset the billions of dollars of people they were terminating. So this consulting agency went in and said, we can put software to plug the gaps and fill operational process that people are otherwise doing. Moral of the story is pivot, understand there are people still buying even in a recession or in an economic downturn. Stay the course, communicate openly and honestly, whether you're a leader down or you're a field rep and you need to talk above you. And back to the loss conversation, you need to lose quick and frequently to understand what the playing field really looks like inside of this new economic downturn.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Todd.
Yeah, and I'm going to double down on what Jason just said. Think back to March of 2020. What did all of you do, right? When all of a sudden there's uncertainty, there's three core things you all did, right? Number one is you cut out your discretionary spending, right? Like, I don't need that personal trainer, the new couch that we knew that's going to wait. Like, we cut out discretionary. Second thing we did is we looked at the things that we had to buy and looked for ways to reduce cost on those, right? Like, I don't need a gallon of milk from Whole Foods, but I can get it at Aldi for half. It's still coming out of a cup, right? Like, that's the kinds of things that we did. And number three is we looked to extend our runway on the things we knew we were going to need, i.e. go look at pictures of March 2020 outside your local Costco for the people hoarding toilet paper. Like, we can't survive without two-ply, right? Now, my advice back then is the same now, where I was advising—
buy more toilet paper.
Buy more, yes, and exactly, like load up on Lysol. It was this, and this is a little extreme, but I was advising my companies, that my customers, go to your website right now. Look at your messaging, hit select all, and then hit delete, and then get in a room and go, what is our messaging and positioning now? Because our messaging and positioning that resonated in summer of 2019 is not the same as April of 2020. Your messaging that resonated in August of 2021 is not the same messaging that resonates in August of 2022.
Yeah, right.
Those three things, cut out discretionary, reduce cost, and extend runway, are what every company is thinking about right now. And so, Jason, to your point, look for those companies that are going to double down in these areas, right? They're like the companies that do well in a downturn, right? Like healthcare, consumer goods, like discount retail, like those types of things. But number two is make sure your messaging is talking to what we all as human beings are caring about right now, which is those three things. And if there's any fluff, if there's any discretionary language in your messaging, you got to delete it. All right, like that's— look at your messaging and rejigger it for August of 2022, because what worked 3 months ago is not the same.
Excellent advice. I will tell everybody here, though, that you've just been through a training exercise since 2020. called COVID, the pandemic. Right? So we've all been through it. I know the things that I'll just share with you what got us into a growth position through the pandemic. We grew 16% throughout the pandemic, but it was all about the data. And again, we have a data group here, data science and data engineers, and we use various tools, Power BI and Tableau. But we really ate our own dog food, and or we drank our own champagne, I'm supposed to say, I guess. The biscuit was good. I'm still, and by the way, I take exception, Todd, to you mentioning the discretionary spending and dropping the personal trainer. You were looking right at me when you said that. So it was all about the data. And so we drank our own champagne, we used the data, and it really guided us to not only the industries that were buying, because there were a number of industries that were buying, but the industries that weren't buying was just as important to know. And then understanding the messaging that you needed to do or you need to create in order to engage and educate. So great stuff, guys. So now I want to thank you both, but we're going to go to a questions. Folks, I'm going to ask you, by all means, if you've got questions, it says here we have answers. I can't guarantee we have the answers, but put the questions in anyways. So please put in your questions, and I'm going to field them and ask the panel as they roll in. And Sarah, you're in the background getting these for me, so I'm just waiting a little bit here.
While we're waiting for the question, Jim, I used to motivate my team through COVID, because we are mid-market, high growth business, but we don't have the marketing budgets like Oracle and Salesforce. So I called COVID the greatest sales equalizer. And I explained that you can't go see Metallica and Foo Fighters at Dreamforce, and you're not going to private jet tours to wineries. And for a mid-market, high-growth company, COVID for us was equalizing the playing field. So.
Oh, very good. I'm sorry, I was reading the question. It just came in too. During the pandemic, like many companies, our team went fully remote. Now that our company has opened back up, I want my sales team to come back into the office, but experiencing pushback. How do I get them come back in so we can have the person energy we once had without feeling like I am forcing them? So I guess the question is, how do I get them to come back without making them feel like I'm forcing them to come back?
You know, I've got a lot of opinions on this. If you're looking at the data right now, there are certain generations that want to go back, right? Like there's certain people that are tired of their annoying roommate and having to spend 10 hours a day there, and like they want to go be with their coworkers and go experience that. And there's others that have really, really gotten used to this and love it, spending time with their families and not having to commute an hour each way every day. And so like my advice is this: whatever strategy you use, I want all of you to recognize two issues that I'm seeing. Number one issue is distance bias, meaning when you think about your reps and their career paths, we as human beings have an inclination to, when promotion opportunities come up, we're going to promote the people that we know that we're in the office with. And like those people that are remote, we kind of forget about, right? Because it's just a natural, like, hey, I know that this person's going to succeed because I'm around them every day. Mm-hmm. Whatever your plan is, make sure you recognize that and you attune for it, right? Make sure that you're not creating a distance bias, and that, because once you create unfairness or a perception of inequity in your teams, that is the fastest trigger to disengagement that you're ever going to find. Number two, though, is perk inflation, and or what I call expectation inflation, which is everybody had a cost associated with traveling. That was the normal. Then they all went remote, and oh my gosh, I don't have to spend money on all that. Like, yeah, like, oh, that's great. And then you're bringing it back going, hey, that's the way it always was. You got to come back to the office. They view that as you've taken something away from them. You haven't returned to the old. Just make sure you're aware of that, and you're not inadvertently favoring people in their wallets that stay remote and forcing the people that come back into the office to have to make a bigger investment in not only costs associated with travel, but probably aspirin too. So just look at those two things, distance bias and expectation inflation, attune for that. And I mean, I think that the pendulum swings right back to the middle, that we're creating a flexible environment longer term.
Very good. Very good. I'm cognizant of the time, and I want to be respectful to the audience. And so if we're not getting to your questions, please send them in, and we'll send back answers. We'll collaborate and get those answers back to you folks who are asking. I want to start to wrap this up. I'm supposed to give you guys a special offer. So we are doing a CRM optimization audit. It's a 45-minute complimentary discussion. It is not a sales event. We're not going to come in and sell. We're going to educate and allow you to be on a journey of whatever your buying journey is. We'll review your current processes and the usage of CRM. We'll identify, opportunities to leverage other automations, perhaps, and data optimization and for your scale. Uh-oh, you took that away from me. I was reading. So that's the optimization. And if you're interested, there's a quick poll up there. We'll make sure we get that done. But again, I want to reinforce to you what will happen if you say yes. What will happen is we'll schedule that. It will be an expert. It will not be a salesperson. You will not be called to death and sold. This purpose is to educate. And if you decide you'd like to work with us at some point, that's terrific too. So then, there's the number 3. I missed that. Document actionable next steps for you, and then you can follow the plan on your own or work with us or not. But it'll be based on education. The next thing I want to make sure you're aware of, we have an upcoming CRM contenders event. Oh, see, Sugar's the contender. We should have that Rocky theme song in the background, but it's Salesforce versus SugarCell. Which CRM is right for you? We want to educate you. We've got Garrett Hogan, who's here at BrainSell. He's the vice president of our customer experience. We have Dennis Smith, who's vice president of sales at SugarCRM. And it'll be educational as well, so you can see the differences, which one is right for you. And by the way, it's not that, there's bad and good. It's about what is the right fit for you, and you'll have other decisions to make around that. So if you'd like to, there's another poll up there. Look at that. Boy, marketing's doing a good job. Would you like to be registered for this webinar? Just pick one. And again, what you can expect if you sign up, you're just going to expect to go to a webinar that provides education to you. Be any crazy sales activities with SalesLoft hitting every day to make a decision. And by the way, no, that's not a knock against SalesLoft. I didn't mean that. We do, by the way, we've created the integrations of SalesLoft and outreach to Sugar. Yep. So, look at that. This is my favorite slide. So I'm going to give myself a promotion. I host a podcast called Growth Enablement Madness. If you haven't gotten the idea yet, I'm crazy about this whole concept. I've been doing this a long time, 28 years. What I love about doing this, and I really love it because during that 28 years, it wasn't perfect. I would see people buy software and fail at it, and it always broke my heart because it just doesn't. You don't want that to happen. You want people to be successful, and so I'm really excited about how we've really changed our vision, the outcome-based concepts, and getting folks to their outcomes. So I hope you'll sign up for the podcast, subscribe, share it with folks. It can be found wherever podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, and Amazon Music. I know that Jason and Todd are constantly listening to this, and they've shared it with all their family members. If you haven't, please do. But I want to thank you, Todd Caponi. Again, the book is The Transparency Sales Leader right here. Great book. If you haven't done or bought this, you need to do it. And trust me, you will thank me when you do. And when you review it on Amazon, because you just mentioned my name, because I get a royalty for, no, I don't. I get nothing, but it would be nice if you mentioned it anyways. And I want to thank you, Jason Rushforth, your official title. Well, I just know you as you run worldwide sales for SugarCRM. Is it worldwide? Do we say worldwide?
I just call myself a good guy.
You're a good guy. Okay. Good guy. All right. I just felt like we were just in a Goodfellas movie for a second. What are you laughing at? You think I'm funny? I'm a clown? Anyways, hey, thank you all for listening. And thank you both, Jason and Todd, for being a part of this. Take care and good selling out there. Be safe, everybody.
Thank you.